Sorry we're running behind and it's a week late, but previously on Worlds Asunder.
And the village idiot's, oh, it's easy. And he just takes his bow and he shoots it into a barn across the way, and then he takes a can of paint and he goes up and paints the target around. So we've all kind of heard this, right? But the point is, it's
As storytellers, we want to capture the hearts, minds, and imaginations of our readers, mainly through our expertly crafted worlds.
Creating new worlds in any genre might seem like a daunting task, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel for every story.
Welcome, weary writers, to Worlds Asunder, a world-building and writer's life podcast.
My co-host is David Shadoin, better known as Shady. It's not just a descriptor, it's also his moniker.
And she's H.Y. Grigger, or you can call her Haley, your friendly post-apocalyptic wasteland elf.
Together, we've got enough published to fill a small shelf, but why should you listen to us? Because we called in some favors.
Every other week, we bring you the best and brightest to give you the tips and tricks on world building and character building like the pros. So, open up your ear holes.
Get out your pen and paper.
And get ready for us to tear Worlds Asunder. This week, we brought Steve Ruskin back, and we give you The Maimed Historian, Part 2. Enjoy.
And so, because history can be all kinds of messy, especially if you start adding fictional secret history elements, I decide up front where I want my arrow to go roughly, right? So a good example is my novella, The El Greco Enigma, which is a small book in the Trina Piper series that I use to kind of introduce new readers to it. So it's not that long, it's 30,000 words or so. So it's not too complex, and so it's easy to talk about. It's set in Toledo, set at the end of the 16th century, and in Toledo, one of my favorite artists is this guy El Greco, which just means the Greek, and he was a Greek painter who trained in Italy and then ended up in Spain, and he's one of the well-known Spanish Renaissance artists, right? And he has this famous painting in this little chapel. It's a big mural. It's called The Burial of the Count of Orgaz, right? And it's beautiful. I've seen it. I love it. Toledo's a cool town. Have you been? So it's this ancient medieval town up on this hill. And I'm like, I want to set something there. That was my arrow. I didn't know what the mystery was. I didn't know what the sort of secret history behind it all was. But that's where I wanted to go. And I'm like, because I like Toledo, my wife and I went there years ago, and I'm a big fan of El Greco. As a historian, I'm not a geek, but I do like some art history. And I was like, I'm gonna write this story here. And so I just keep going. I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to just dominate this.
That's what you're here for.
No, that's what I'm.
This is why you're here.
So this is the village idiot approach for me, right? This is how I do this. I know where I want to be, and it's kind of armchair traveling. I think of all the places that I've traveled. I'm like, I want to sort of recreate that in my stories because it's fun and I enjoy it. Because then, right, like when you have something you're passionate about, it's easier to write about.
Yes,
right?
And it shows.
Right. So I like Toledo. I like El Greco. That's my arrow. Plunk. So what's the mystery? How does this target come later that makes it look like that was where I was aiming the whole time? So in this particular case, El Greco does this painting around 1586, right? Takes him a couple years. I'm like, so he's going to hide a secret in this painting. That's what's going to happen. Trina's going to get called there because they found some hint about a secret in this painting. What the hell is it going to be? And I honestly had no idea. I knew I wanted Toledo and I wanted El Greco, right? So I kind of start doing some research. I go to Wikipedia, and then I remember, Toledo was famed at the time for its sword making, right? And it was so famous that like samurai were coming from Japan to buy their steel there and buy their swords. Okay, that's cool. So I paint a little ring, right? I don't know how exactly this is going to work, but I'm going to use steel, sword making. And then I kind of look a little bit more, and then I'm like, what's going on in Toledo? What's going on in Spain? And I'm like, 1588, the Spanish Armada sets off, and of course, Philip II wants to defeat Elizabeth in England with the help of the Dutch, and he sends the Armada, and it, we all know what happens there. So I'm like, okay, there's another thing I want to add. I don't know how, right? So I need to start connecting these dots, and then so I kept looking, and I realized I found this really cool article how these families in Toledo that made these swords, they all had kind of their own special recipes that they kept hidden, or I mean they kept close to their chests. Not recipes like, I mean steel was steel, but how many times they folded it, how hot they made it. They all kind of had their own special recipes. And this article talked about this in the context of present day where that art is lost, right? And I'm like, well, that's really cool. There's another ring to the target. So then I start thinking, okay, I'm going to put all these together. How do I do it? And that's where I mean, again, revealing the plot, and that's okay. I had a sword maker who was being sent with his sons, the whole family, off to fight England because they were going to be the sword makers for the Spanish Armada, there to help repair weapons and that sort of thing. Worried that they might not come back, so they hire El Greco to hide their secret recipe, and that's kind of the plot. That's how it turns out. But I didn't really know where I was going to go with all that until I started kind of weaving those pieces together. But it starts with just taking the arrow and like Toledo, El Greco, that's where I want to go. And then I kind of expand until I find something that seems interesting enough, because everyone knows the Spanish Armada. Everyone, I think, knows a little bit about Toledo and has kind of maybe heard about their sword making. Maybe not, but if you do, then you introduce it, you kind of create it. So I've talked, that's 10 minutes. That's probably way too much, but that's the village idiot approach, right? Think about what you want to do, aim for it, doesn't have to be accurate, and then make it look afterwards like that's where you were aiming the entire time. And that tends to work out pretty well. It can be hard. It's not as easy as I made it sound because there's a lot of hair wringing and it's like, wow, does this even, or hair pulling, it's like, does this even make sense? But you try, works out.
I love that approach. And I think that specifically is really appropriate for this podcast because I know that you've talked so much about characters are really important. And the really popular plotting method right now that a lot of people talk about is character-driven plots. But there's a lot to be said for putting things together and building from your world up, which sounds like a lot of what you do because you've already got Trina, which helps once you've established a character. But then you take all of these excellent, super cool world elements and you go, cool, this is all awesome, and then you're all amped up and that helps you build the plot. And I think that's great. You have also brought me back to something I really wanted to talk to you about, which is location research. Because you have traveled quite a bit. Your books, your thrillers, your urban fantasy thrillers, maybe is what we should call them, take place largely in Europe. What kind of location research have you done? How else has that influenced beyond Toledo? Your decisions?
No, that's a really good question. And I think, that highest point about it being in Europe, and that's kind of more of a strategic. I mean, part of it's personal. I like Europe. My mom's German. I've lived over there a lot. But also there's sort of a slightly mercenary piece of it is that Americans like Europe. I'm writing mostly for Americans. And I was looking, if you think about Da Vinci Code, you think about Dan Brown, you think about Steve Berry, you think about James Rollins, a lot of these are set in and around Europe. Europe's older. I think Americans have this sort of romanticized sense of Europe. So I'm tapping into that. I'm trying to tap into that. People like Europe. I happen to be one of them. I happen to have lived over there. So I've lived in Cambridge, which is where kind of Trina is based. I've lived in, my mom's German, I've lived over there in Munich, I've lived in Berlin for a while, and traveled all over, right? I used to love traveling. I'd get on high school, college, I would do the URL thing in the summer. I'd load up in my backpack and just get a URL pass and travel all around. Because I just thought it was so cool. Castles and museums and stuff, I just thought that was awesome. Because, growing up in Colorado Springs, I was like, this is, we don't have any history here. We do. But when I was younger, I was like, this is boring. Castles are cool. We do. I know. Yes. There's a lot more here than I gave it credit for when I was younger.
It's just not
But it took me off. But anyway, so again, it's kind of that, you write, I think I write better when I like what I'm writing about. And part of that's reliving kind of fun times I've had, right? I mean, you think about all the Vatican thrillers that there are out there. There are so many indie authors writing Vatican secret archive things because people know about Rome, they know about the Vatican, they know it's been around for millennia, basically, and they've got thousands of years of cool stuff. You can just imagine what's in there. So people like Europe, and there are certain things that, they know Paris, they know London, they know Rome. So I'm basically just tapping into that. And then when it comes down to me specifically, it's just easier to write if I've been somewhere, right? So I've been to Toledo, I like it. I used to live in Cambridge, would go to London all the time, so that made writing the Newton Cipher, at least the locations, pretty easy, but I still get things wrong. So I was in London a couple weeks ago, and I realized I was back in Westminster Abbey for the first time in like over 20 years. And I write about the Newton cipher, I write about where Isaac Newton's buried, and I put him in the wrong place. And I'm sitting there, standing there, I'm off by a few feet. In other words, I put him in this sort of sarcophagus, but he's actually in the floor, and I forgot that, and I knew it at one point. But in the book, I don't have him right there on the floor. So
there was a movie that is visited.
Oh yeah, I could have figured it out, but I just didn't because I was just probably typing away. But so even then, even though I've been to a lot of these places, I forget some of the details. But anyway, yeah. So location research, a lot of it is personal. So in the second book, it's mostly Paris. I've been to Paris. It's a lot in Versailles. But then, for whatever reason, I had one of the bad guys, the antagonist, in Cyprus, which is in the middle of the Mediterranean. I've never been there, but I kind of needed a small little island, and so I use a lot of Google Earth and Google Maps and travel blogs and stuff like that. Yeah. So some I know really well, some I just, I'm winging it.
So authors have particular details they like to chase down when it comes to world building, right? We've talked to Gail Carragher, like her absolute thing. She loves to travel too, but she's a big foodie. Mm-hmm. That's like the number one thing she prides herself on. I'm trying to think of, I think Ike told us his, but I can't remember it off the top of my head what he likes to discuss.
Architecture is a popular one.
Architecture,
language, religion.
What is the one detail? Since you do pull from history versus kind of creating history, what's the one detail that you like to go pull from, the things that you always include in books?
Espresso.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's not a historical detail, but yes. So I love espresso. I spent a decent amount of time in Italy. And now I have an Italian espresso machine. My wife will not leave the house until I make her a latte every morning. Now my oldest daughter is the same way. But it's a really nice machine. It's imported through New York and everything. But yes, so Trina and her mentor, her professor, who's she drinks coffee probably half a dozen times in each book. And that's like a character, I don't know what you want to call it, a
quirk.
A tag, right? Or a quirk or something. So that's always in there. And so when she goes to, I'm just finishing up a book, I won't reveal it yet, but she's in a Germanic speaking country. Ooh. There's a certain type of coffee there. And a good friend of mine lived in the city where she spends time. And I had been there, but not in 30 years. I'm asking my buddy Darren, who's also a professor of history. I'm like, what's the coffee? So he gave me all the details. He's like, use this cafe and stuff. In Paris, they have, in France, they have a different type of coffee. In London, it's just straight up espresso. So yeah, there's tags. But I vary it slightly based on where she goes. But then you can describe those things that I think draw you into a fictional account, which is the smells and the taste and the touches, just those five senses. You want the sound of. So in the case of walking into a cathedral, for example, it's quiet. So if you go to St. Paul's in Rome, even though they're massive, they're always nice and quiet. You can hear the footsteps echoing. You put those details in there, or describing a painting, right? A Renaissance painting, or the sound of a church bell. Which chimes, on the hour, every hour, the number of times per hour. Those are the sorts of things that at least help me bring back what it was like, say, being in Paris or a little village, in the middle of Germany or whatever. And I just think that's good. I think it doesn't even, that's not even historical necessarily, but what do you guys do? You write fiction too. Do you like those details too, right? Those sensory details?
Yeah.
To bring people in. You almost have to. It's almost obligatory, or otherwise you get that white room.
I focus, for at least for Companion to Ghosts, I focus primarily on smells. Mm-hmm. But it was funny because so did Casey Ezell, my co-author for Companion to Ghosts. She was writing a cat assassin. And so their primary sense is either hearing or smell. Yeah. I did it through the lens of a human, and it was primarily because he thinks with his stomach.
Yeah.
Right? And so that was a lot of there was a couple places where it was just like I would mention a smell or something, and then she would give the flip side take on that same smell.
Yeah.
When I did we're probably gonna plug it later, but when we did the short for Remnants, I focused primarily on feel. Because it was one of those things that the character in that particular instance was just being beaten down by a bunch of different things. But like I'm also a big foodie, so like I'm going to, if I want to set a scene in a particular place, I ended up making up a food truck for Companion to Ghosts in Houston. Yeah. Madre de Dios, which is a totally different reference in and of itself for people who can figure that one out. But yeah, no, so I'd focused on like a bunch of the different foods and different restaurants I'd either been to or that I knew exists somewhere in Texas, but maybe not Houston. And because it's future Houston, I can kind of move things around a little bit.
Yeah. And you probably do the same, right? I mean, I guess because what I'm getting at is I think those 5 senses from your protagonist or just whoever you're describing, usually you're in the head of someone. Yeah. That's how you can get into the feel of wherever you are. If it's the past, it's like that musty smell of old stone in a cathedral, or the bright colors of a Renaissance painter. If it's science fiction, it's like a cat's ass and a cat being that has hypersensitive hearing and smell. Like I write science fiction too. My ExoRok Rebels, they have like there's narc sticks, which is basically a sort of drug type. It's a drug type. I mean, it's like a cigarette, I guess, with some sort of narcotic, and it's got a distinct smell. You describe that stuff, and that's the future. It doesn't really exist, but you make it so, and that brings you into that particular location, whether it's history or some space station.
Yeah, drawing parallels. So, did you start writing ExoRok first, or did you write Trina first? And how did they transition? You didn't write either first?
No, I'm sorry. Okay. I was saying no to the second part. I started, so my science fiction series is the ExoRok Rebels. And I started writing that first because the very first short story that I wrote in it was something that I was taking Dean Wesley Smith's and Chris Rush's classes, and it was something that came out of that, and I just sort of expanded. And that was probably a couple years that I started writing those before I started writing the historical thrillers. And those were almost an accident because Eric Flint, we all go to Superstars writing seminars. Eric Flint was one of the founders. He has since passed away. He used to run this writer's seminar where you would submit the first 3 chapters, roughly 8,000 words of a book, and he would critique it. And I was like, I want to do that because Eric Flint is impressive and I want him to critique me even if he tears me up. And the director was like, yes, okay, you're in, because you had to kind of apply. She's like, but send me the first 3 chapters of your book. And I'm in my head, I was like, I don't have a book right now. So she was like, by Wednesday or whatever, and it was probably Sunday. I remember in like 3 days, I cranked out 8,000 words, which became the first part of the Newton Cipher, and Eric Flint reviewed it, and he didn't realize, I didn't tell anyone that I didn't have the whole book, and he said, well, it's all right, but, he said it's good. I don't know if the rest of it's any good, and I was going, neither do I.
Me neither.
And then afterwards, he pulled me aside, he's like, just send it to me, because he had a publishing company, as we know.
Yeah,
not everyone knows this, and he's like, send it to me, and I liked it, I'm gonna read the rest of it. So I went home and cranked it out over like the next couple months. So that I almost didn't expect to, I never intended to write the whole book, but it started to sell well and then it turned out well. But so anyway, that came after. And at that point, I think I was a little better writer than when I started the science fiction, at least the first book of the science fiction series. So I was a little more competent in doing some of the things we talked about.
Okay. Well, with that then, to talk about science, we've talked about, I guess, science fiction just a little bit. You recently wrote in the Remnants of Empire anthology, and Shady and I both have stories in that as well, shameless plug. The genre is space opera, and it is not your world.
Right.
So would you give us like a bird's eye experience of the difference between writing in somebody else's world and what kind of research you did versus doing it on your own?
Absolutely. So we all wrote in this book, or in this anthology, Remnants of Empire, which is in Casey Azel's Ashes of Anticia. And Casey asked us all, which was really cool. I was totally honored because I think the world of Casey.
She was stoked to have you.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I tell her thanks or whatever. But it was, I was thrilled because I just, some people,
Steve will send you a text.
Yeah.
It's nice when you get asked by someone that you really respect. It's
Agreed.
it's just really cool. And so we were all reading the first draft, and I guess this is kind of goes back to my historian's brain. Is there's a, so there are these creatures called Alaricines. That's how I pronounce it, right? They're these little rat-like guys and gals, cute little furry, like big chinchillas, but they're feisty and they're strong and stuff.
I was imagining them as like ROUSs.
Yes, exactly. Rodents of unusual size. Yeah. But she talked about, so this is as an empire's fallen. It's kind of like throwing out 2,000 years down the road. But she talked about how the Alaricines, their home planet, I think it was like 14 centuries earlier, was destroyed basically. And it's almost like a throwaway line.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh. And then Casey told us, like, come up with something, tell me what it is, and write it. And I was like, okay, Casey, you said that 14 centuries ago, their planet was falling apart and they basically had to flee. And the barbarians took it over and different things happened, but there wasn't much there. And I'm like, can I use this piece? And she's like, go for it. And we kind of worked out a few details. But I was like, that sounds awesome. So then I got to create the period of time in which this world was collapsing ecologically, and these Alaricines, because humans were there, and these Alaricines had to escape. So I think that's just kind of the way I work, because I tried I was brainstorming a few ideas with you and other things, but that's the one that really just struck me, and I think it just felt comfortable, and it was fun. It was kind of like Schindler's List meets Obi-Wan, because these Alaricines, the humans didn't want them to leave, so he has to, like, my hero, my protagonist has to, like, help some of them escape. And she wanted us to, she called it hard history. She's basing a lot of this on human history, medieval, ancient. And so I was kind of looking at the exodus of the Jews in the Middle Ages, the Sephardic Jews. And anyway, I mean, just kind of as an inspiration. And you kind of drew on Russian history. And I don't know, what was yours? Did you have a hard history piece of yours? I don't remember.
It does.
Yeah, so it was primarily the Templar.
That's right.
It's I went to the start. I was originally going to go for the end, which I'm a lot more familiar with. But then, so when you had decided to go the direction you went, instead of going towards the end, she had asked if I would do the beginning.
Yeah.
And so then I wrote it based off of Porto.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you.
Because so my story ends up following his, and then it's kind of his is during the Empire, and then mine is some couple centuries, half a millennia later.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's where I ended up.
But we all kind of drew on a piece of actual history
as
a very loose inspiration, sort of skeleton upon which to add the flesh and stuff.
I twisted mine a little because based on the science tech that she has, I took Rasputin and I threw him back in time several hundred years to the era of Ivan the Terrible and expansionist Russia, which also took place during the Empire. But then I can do cool, like, cloning things or cryosleep things and bring him back and do a Romanov fall later as well. So world building is cool because it lets you take stuff like that and twist it and manipulate it and then turn it into your own crazy little monster, which is sometimes what writing feels like to me.
Yeah, and the key piece there, like, kind of different from what we were talking about earlier, is that we are not on Earth talking about any of these. These are all like, we were looking for space Russia or space Europe or the space Templars, but they don't have to be exactly accurate. They just need to have kind of like that vibe of, oh, I think I know exactly where you pulled this from.
Yeah.
And it is post-Earth specifically for this. So in my story, they have their medallions that the crest has a bear on it, and they're like, yeah, this was this crazy animal that they had on Earth centuries and centuries and centuries ago. So you can make fun references.
Yeah. Well, and I actually think that's important though, because I think even like the most far-flung space opera or fantasy, I think readers like to have some familiarity, even if it's almost subconscious, right? It just kind of ties it back into the humanness. Even if your characters aren't necessarily human, they still want to empathize as they're reading, I think.
Yeah.
That's something that I love about going back to Trina, and I joked about the espresso, but that is something that so many people are going to read that and go, yes, I love this, because they love coffee also, right? And so you're able to make point-to-point connections with the characters, which you see in world building as well, because when you're writing about Cambridge, people who have been there are going to be like, yeah, I remember going here, or dang it, the next time I'm there, I need to go see these sites. And I think that that's a great way to engross and almost interact with your readers while they're going through the story.
Well, that's good to hear, because I try. I mean, she's not a superhero, she's not a spy, she doesn't have any special training, she's just an historian who kind of gets caught in this crazy world that she didn't really exist. And I think most readers are obviously going to be the same sort of person. So all those little bits of familiarity, like she just takes comfort in having a coffee and thinking things through.
Changing into clean clothes, finally, after however many days it's been.
I try to do, I just think that stuff's important because that's the sort of character she is. Now, if she was a superhero, I probably wouldn't spend, or if she was a super spy or something, or a Navy SEAL, I wouldn't spend time on her sipping coffee, because she'd be out, or kicking ass in a different way or something. But
I don't know, James Bond always has his martini.
That's true. Yeah. He does. See?
That's a trademark thing, though.
Everybody's gonna have their quirks, but you did bring up like the changing out of dirty clothes and finally showering. Like that's a unique piece of both character building and world building, because it's one of those things where, to some extent, we want to put this in our world, and so the way to do that is those small things, the things that do, like if you've ever traveled overseas at all, or even if you've just traveled for a couple days cross country, like being able to take a hot shower and changing is just one of those things that like universally makes people feel better. So
well, and it's also part of the structure of the effective storytelling technique of scene and sequel, right? Yeah. When you have the sequels, like when people are stepping back from like an intense action scene, they're reflecting, and part of that is just like taking a breather and like, oh yeah, I just tore up I'm not giving away anything for book 3, but there may or may not be an avalanche involved. And when you escape from an avalanche, not that I ever have, fortunately, things get torn up, your skis get beat up, and your ski suit might be torn. And so, but those are the sorts of things, they can take off, you can like look at what the hell we did to my ski pole, and or the ski suit's all shredded. Doing those sorts of things, humans can relate to it, even though they've never been in an avalanche. But it's also a chance to like reflect, and that's part of that sequel piece before they go into the next action scene or whatever, and you're always kind of going up and down, and that's where those pieces, I think, matter, because the reader then breathes a sigh of relief with them, or feels that hot shower or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
So kind of blending the two, nonfiction and then your alt or your historical fiction with your urban, kind of mixed urban fantasy thriller. Where did you have a hard time separating from the two? Did you write a nonfiction book after you'd started writing fiction?
No, I have not written a nonfiction book since I've started writing fiction. I mean, I was sort of writing the first grade Eclipse book I did, and that was pretty easy because that's a short one, and I knew all the stuff already. I mean, I had already written some pieces anyway, so that was kind of while I was first kind of learning to write fiction too, and was probably in my first or second novel, 2017. But I don't really have a problem separating those mentally. Okay. But I mean, I can only work on one thing at a time, really, even if that's just for like one day or a couple hours. Like I'm not the sort of person, I've tried it and I've failed utterly trying to switch between projects in the same day or at the same time. I just need uninterrupted periods of time. Now, if I after a couple of weeks, if something drops and I'm just like, I can't go anywhere with this, I might switch to something else for a little while. Yeah. But I need to give it a little bit of time. I don't know how you two are, but
I'm like that.
Yeah.
Big time. I struggle with juggling projects. I'm trying to learn to be better, but
because it's funny, one of our fellow superstars was reading a beta copy of one of my second or third ExoRok Rebels book a couple years ago. And he's like, you call her Naomi, or Noemi is my protagonist. And he's like, but here you're calling her Trina. What's going on here? And I was like,
oh no.
Yes, thanks for catching that. Because I don't, it's a pro tag. And in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, same person. So I probably would have never caught that. No, my editor would have, but he was beta reading it before I went to my editor. So that's what happens if you're not careful. You'll start, those storylines will start crossing.
Yeah, I would absolutely do that.
My follow-on question probably is pretty much blank, but it was going to be like any tips or tricks then from dividing, because you have written in multiple genres.
Yeah.
How do you even day to day, how do you switch it on and off? Like, or is it different for you? Is it really kind of similar and you're just skinning it a little differently?
I wish I was more organized than I am, but what I do, and invariably ideas will come up for other projects. I just tend to write them down. The problem is I don't always write them down in an organized way, and so I have sticky notes everywhere, and I have files open, and that's a pain. But that's a Steve problem, a Steve failing that I need to work on. But really, what I try to do is get an idea down quickly or something, or if I have an idea or an outline or something, and then I try to set it aside just to focus. Because I really try to avoid that shiny object syndrome, which affects us all, right?
Yes.
But you just got to I just have to be careful. If I get distracted, then I could be 3/4 of the way through a book. And this has happened back when I first started. I have a couple books, novels that are 3/4 of the way done, and I went off. I have two in particular I can think of. I went off and I never came back. And I'm like, and it's probably for the best actually, because they were early, and so it's good. I just got probably some kinks worked out mentally or storytelling wise, but I know I just got sidetracked, and you have to finish. Yeah. Even if it's bad, because then you can make it better. But if you don't finish, then you're in kind of a world of hurt. So
huge. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time, and you've got family stuff and places you got to be. Do you have any final closing remarks for world building, research, nonfiction, where to find you, etc.?
Oh, well, sure. I guess closing remarks. Obviously, we're talking about a very specific type of world building, which is sort of using history in fictional environments. So, I don't think I have too much to add other than I like what Tim Powers, we all know Tim Powers, the author of many books, but The Anubis Gates is one of his great sort of historical fiction, kind of time travel books. But I remember reading an interview with Tim Powers where he said he really wanted to write a book, a historical fiction book, where he never changed anything that happened in history. And he kind of, in saying that, he knew the impossibility of it. And I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? And then this was years ago when I first read that. And now I think there's no way. Because for me, that wouldn't be fun. It's fun to change a little bit, and I think it's okay to do that. And maybe as an historian, because I spent so much time being a slave to all the right facts and thinking like an academic, like this article or book that I'm writing, some other academic's going to read this line and totally excoriate me, and I'll never get tenure. And so, academics obsess over every line and footnote and everything, and it's so freeing in fiction to not be like that. But I still struggle with that, I'll admit, where I'll be like writing, I'm like, no, this is total BS. No one's going to believe it. And then I'm like, wait, I'm writing fiction. So it's okay that it's total BS. But
there's also magic, so if
and there's magic, yeah. So, but it's a fine line, because I want history to be as accurate as possible until I reach that point where it just can't be anymore. Right. And I need to make up the thing that didn't really happen, but it works for the plot. So I guess if there's advice there, it's that it's okay to play with history. History can be I don't want to say the bad word, but history can be your playground, right? You can abuse history as you want for the sake of fiction. And have fun with it. Maybe not abuse that, but you can twist history to enjoy it. So anyway.
Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome. Yeah, you can find me at, like JD said at the beginning, steveruskin.com is my simple website right now. I need to make it a little more complex, but right now I just don't have time, so I'm using Story Origin, and it's a nice little landing page.
We'll have links to his website and his newsletter and everything up in the show notes, so you can look those up, and we'll take care of them.
I'll just say, history can be your bitch. Nick and I were talking about this. Nick Thacker and I were talking about this. And that's okay. It can be fun to twist history where you want.
Can that be the name of the episode? No.
History can be your bitch.
We could.
If you're nice about it.
Making history your bitch with Steve Ruskin.
Yeah.
I love that. We'll see.
I have plenty of ideas.
We'll see what we can get away with.
When are we getting Trina Piper movies?
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
You know who should hit up? James Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another previous guest of Worlds Asunder.
Or future
James
guests, future guest depending on when it airs.
Oh, his will probably come out before.
Cool.
Yeah, this may come out first.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Maybe.
But
I'll see
James is
how
awesome,
it goes.
so.
Yeah.
But he also is over on Ink and Effort here on Book Career Network.
For writers.
Go check him out.
Yeah. Plug.
Yeah, and I just like to get the third book out. I'm like in the last chapter, basically.
Send it to me, please, when you're done
I
with
will.
it. Thank
I
you.
will.
And then make sure to invite us to the premiere.
That would be fun.
Anyway, Steve, we would love to keep you here and talk to you about all of the things. But I know you've probably got a Tough Mudder to go run. Or,
We've overrun our welcome already, probably.
We've kept you around for way too long. I know your legs are getting antsy because you're not working out more. So we'll cut it off here. I have been your host, Shady. This has been Haley. And Steve.
I have been Steve.
You are still Steve, the L'Oreal commercial model. Thank you again.
Voice.
Yeah, seriously, thank you so much.
It's fun. I like you guys. I like this. I think it's a great podcast. Or I guess it's more than a podcast, but
we're
videocast.
We're fortunate to be able to bring in really great people who know what they're talking about. So that has made all the difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. But we will, hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, we'll hit all the links in the show notes where you can find Steve, where you can find us. And if you like that kind of thing, we will definitely ask Steve to come back on for some other episodes that we have planned, because we didn't delve into
a lot of things
that we would love to get into. We kind of focus this one primarily on a little bit of the nonfiction, but the historical fiction piece. So if there's anything that you want to see or questions you have for Steve, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, we will catch you next week. Same bat time, same bat place.
All right.
Thank you so much. Seriously.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure.
Well, that's it. He made it to the end of the second episode of Steve Ruskin, the main historian. I'm pretty sure he went and ran at least 5 miles after. He was getting super antsy, having to sit still that long. No, we jest with Steve, but he's a good dude, and we love having him on. We love hanging out with him. We hope you enjoyed hearing his takes on developing characters and on writing fiction versus nonfiction, as well as using the 5 senses and writing familiar locations in a non-familiar way. We are going to, I'm going to talk about a new show here in a sec, but make sure you go follow all of your favorite authors wherever you can find them in their show notes. Haley works real hard to make sure to bring you those links. We're debuting an episode of a new video cast called the Who the Are We podcast, or video cast, which will debut solely on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, thanks for helping us tear the worlds asunder. We'll see you next time.